In this episode of The Business of E-commerce, I talk with Chris McCabe about Amazon seller account suspension. This is The Business of E-commerce, episode 25. Welcome to The Business of E-commerce, the podcast that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow the e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Pileski. I'm here today with Chris McCabe. Chris has previously worked on Amazon's performance and policy enforcement team. He now consults with Amazon sellers and specializes in helping them during the account suspension process and helps them all the way through getting their account reinstated. So I want to bring Chris on the show. I know if you're an Amazon seller, if you've worked at all with Amazon, you've seen the dreaded suspension notice before. So I want to kind of talk to Chris about what to do and how to handle that and kind of the best practices around that. So, hey, Chris, how you doing today?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. It's definitely an interesting topic for anyone in the Amazon world. I know
It's a scary topic.
very scary topic. There's that suspension notice, and it kind of just happens. And it's one of those things, if you've been around, selling on Amazon long enough, I think everyone's kind of experienced it, at least, one time or another. So I want to kind of get your take on, how to handle it, at least I guess to start off, how to stay away from it, how to have it not happen in the first place, because,
Right.
no one wants this. So this is something, so you kind of work with folks, right, that have already kind of got this notification, or where do you kind of usually come in during this process?
We work with all kinds of sellers. Some sellers are just afraid this is going to happen. I mean, a lot of what I'm really well known already for reinstatement work, for account suspensions, because I used to work on the teams that did the suspending, right? Seller performance. So I had the years inside the company adjudicating appeals, reading people's appeals, or suspending their accounts to begin with. And then, of course, deciding if they'd be reinstated or not. So that's my, 5.5, 6 years of Amazon background there. And now I've been consulting for a few years on the other side, right? Helping people understand the internal gears turning, how to communicate with my former teams, like you said, policy enforcement, performance evaluation teams. So a lot of what we do is education in terms of don't let this happen to you.
So
There are warning signs, and we help people identify those. Yeah, I mean,
and there's actually a person, so there is a person reading these on the other end, because I know
in most cases,
Okay.
yes. I mean, if your metrics are suddenly wildly out of whack, then you might face an automated suspension. One misconception, this is what I focus on quite a bit, is just education in terms of how Amazon works internally, because there's a lot of misinformation out there on like seller forums and Facebook groups.
Yep.
Sometimes I don't sign into those as often these days because I have my own Facebook group. And we do things a little bit differently. We take things from a strategy perspective, like how to prevent this stuff, how to review your account the right way, not just taking advice from somebody who might have a different, like apples and oranges type situation. But I see a lot of sellers giving each other advice and giving each other bad advice based on their idea of how it works inside the company. And I would say maybe 75% of the time when I'm reading sellers communicating with each other on how this stuff works, I see wrong and mistaken information. So
yeah, I feel like it's typically this like gray box where it just kind of, happens. You really can't, most folks don't know what's happening inside. It just kind of, you get the suspension notice and there's some, bullet points, and you have to kind of wade through it. So, and I think a lot of people don't actually, like you said, know why they're getting in the first place.
Right. And sometimes there are warning signs that are simply missed. And you might even have an actual warning, a performance notification sitting in your Seller Central account, flagging you and warning you for something that could potentially cause a suspension, but you as a seller don't realize. Like they do tell you this may result in an account suspension, but you don't realize how close to that you are. You think either you have more time to work it out, or you tell yourself, maybe it's a psychological thing, you tell yourself, well, a lot of people are probably getting this message, and I bet this is a bot, and I bet this is an automated message,
Yes.
and it's not a person sending a message. And that's where it's crucial to understand that that's not correct.
Okay.
And if you make mistakes based on bad information, which again sometimes originates not from something you read on, let's say, seller help pages, but it might come from one of these groups where myths become reality. And that's why you have to talk to people. It doesn't have to be me, but you have to talk to somebody who knows what's true and what isn't.
Okay, so a lot of times they are coming from an actual human, because I've seen these before, and
They're from a person, yeah. The messaging you get may sound automated, and I understand why. It's pre-written, standardized language. But long story short, that's a person who's looking at your account annotations, who's reviewing your account for whatever problem you've been flagged for, and then they're picking the messaging from a drop-down menu in the tools and sending it to you most of the time without modifying the language except to add ASINs, right? To mention which listings you're being restricted on or to tell you, why your account's suspended. But it is standardized messaging. That's not going to change anytime soon. I'm still dealing, it's getting better on the education side of things, but people like yourself doing these kinds of podcasts is helping. So keep doing it. But
because I've personally always assumed it was some sort of automated, like you said, some sort of bot. And I've probably been victim to the misinformation. So this is definitely
yeah, it's not a bot. I mean, that's a bot. Algorithms are at work here, and there are scripts combing through, seller accounts, flagging certain things. There's an automation piece to any of these, most of these processes at least. But then they're grabbing a bunch of sellers, they're throwing them in a bucket, and then investigator is still, just as it was when I was working there, going through these one by one, reading account annotations, looking at what the previous investigator warned you for, because if you're being suspended or considered for suspension, there was usually a warning in the past. So they're looking at the warning, when it was sent. Have you made any changes? Have you corresponded with them since you got warned to say, we're already working on this. We've already got the solutions in place. Certainly you understand what went wrong to begin with without sort of guessing. Or another mistake people make is they kind of grab copy and paste type material like generic templates.
Yep.
Like they found in a seller forum group, or, oh, this exact thing happened to me. They assume it's exactly the same as what happened to their friend, the seller, their colleague, the seller, or a seller who's suspended, let's say, for the same reason. But there's lots of apples and oranges there. You are evaluated against your own account history, your own background as a seller, the items you sell, your past policy violations you had, even if you've resolved them. You are not considered against other sellers of the same products or against people with the same violation in any way other than in a very general, vague sense. In the back of the investigator's mind, maybe they saw an account similar to yours earlier in the day, and that may have a 2% impact on what they decide to do with you. The rest of it, 98%, is they are supposed to, per SOP, evaluate you based on you. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I did not realize that at all. So this is helpful. What are some of the big reasons why these accounts? So I guess people that haven't faced this, or haven't got this. What are some of the big reasons that you get that first kind of warning and then the actual suspension notice? Like what usually happens?
The obvious place to start is performance suspensions, right? If you have a metrics miss, you can look and review your performance metrics anytime and see if you're out of range or not. And you can see if you're kind of trending towards a suspension, because your metrics have to be in range as often as possible, 100% of the time if you can. They're not going to take, if you have late shipment rate problems, if you're canceling tons of orders, they're not going to really take excuses for that. So in advance that you won't be able to write in later and say, well, now we fixed it and everything's back to normal and we're trending in the right direction. You might just be suspended for a metrics miss. So performance evaluation teams, it's fairly straightforward. It's the policy suspensions that trip people up. And that's where it can be deadly to learn or believe the wrong type of information in terms of what they expect.
Because performance, they have that essentially a dashboard, right? Where it's
yeah, I mean, that's more straightforward.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's when around holiday times you do see more automated suspensions. If your late shipment rate's over 4%, you could just be auto suspended for a metrics miss, as opposed to an auto warning the rest of the year. So there are occasions like that. I mean, policy teams, there's a lot of teams dedicated to listing violations, enforcing those, sending warnings for, they could be innocent violations. But since I left the company, a minor infraction is treated as a major infraction. They're much more aggressive in the policing now.
What's an example of a policy violation?
So a listing violation, putting content in the title that doesn't belong there, saying this is Apple-like or Apple-compatible. Those are like trademark violations. A lot of people don't understand the legal side. They get suspended because they don't understand what rights owner infringements are. They don't understand trademark infringement. Copyright infringement, most of us kind of out there in the world as buyers and business people understand what that means. Using somebody else's text, somebody's image, so forth. like if you were to use a Getty image on your website, for instance, Getty's probably going to, hit you with a copyright infringement. But trademark infringement, a lot of people don't understand that you can't use certain terms on Amazon without infringing upon somebody's trademark. You can't, in terms of other intellectual property complaints, a lot of brands don't want you, if you're a reseller on Amazon, which a lot of people are, those brands don't want you selling those products on Amazon without their expressed permission. They can't control your pricing on Amazon the way they would like to. They can't control the content of the listing or the product detail page the way they might like to. And they understand how infringement processes work inside Amazon. So sellers who don't have lawyers that they're working with day in, day out on IP related issues, intellectual property, often find themselves, like you said, lightning bolt suspended out of the blue for something they didn't even understand they were doing because they didn't have the legal training in the process of building that listing or selling those products. They didn't understand that they were kind of, risking an account-wide suspension.
And I feel that's what you hear most of the time. Folks that didn't even realize they were, crossing the line or in some sort of gray area. They thought they were doing everything completely normal, perfect, and then all of a sudden, boom, it hits, and they get kind of a bulleted list on it. Could be one of these three things, and they're not even sure which one of those three things.
Right. And unfortunately, I see people who like those kinds of suspensions, or let's say if you get a safety complaint, Amazon's big on product safety right now. This is one of their the two biggest initiatives right now in my world, and what we see in policy enforcement are prevention of future safety complaints. And then, of course, counterfeit. Amazon's always trying to polish the image of the marketplace as a place where counterfeits aren't welcome. But of course, counterfeits still get in.
And when you say safety complaints, is that on a per listing basis or an entire account basis?
If you get enough safety complaints per ASIN, you will get your entire account suspended.
Okay, so if you were like the hoverboard, the hoverboard
exactly.
account, you don't want to.
Excellent place to start the safety conversation, because the hoverboards, a lot of products like the hoverboards that have like a heat element, like the chargers and the battery packs that overheat or are hot to the touch. Anytime somebody says, "Oh, this overheated, it was hot to the touch," that's a safety complaint waiting to happen. Okay. You could see product reviews that flag a listing for that. It doesn't take many. It's not like, oh, well, if 10% of your items get this kind of complaint, they shut it down. It could be anecdotal. It could be 1 out of 1,000 if it's the wrong kind of complaint. If the investigator reviews the information in the product review, or maybe you get return comments, like return reasons that say this is a dangerous item, or like I usually say, vitamins and supplements. If people say this gave me a stomach ache, a headache, like consumables are a little bit different than electronics, but not really in today's climate, because they both fall under safety complaints. If Amazon thinks they can prevent future safety complaints or negative comments because of your sales of that item by suspending you now, they will do it. That prevents a lot of work for them. And it also, like from a liability standpoint, it reduces the likelihood that they'll get social media campaigns about, hey, this hurt me, I bought it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, that hurts business. It hurts the integrity of the marketplace, right?
I didn't realize they're reading reviews and return, those return comments are actually going somewhere. I didn't realize that.
I mean, viral social media campaigns don't directly lead to Amazon actions by my former teams typically, but viral social media campaigns attract the attention of reporters who do business and tech, who cover the Amazon space. I mean, I don't know if you read Bloomberg and CNBC and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times tech section as often as I do, or if your listeners do. Those reporters, believe me, are paying attention to this stuff.
Yeah, and the whole safety thing is a very hot topic right now with Amazon and all.
Or counterfeit.
So counterfeit's the other big. Yeah. So how does that work?
Counterfeit, I mean, they call them inauthentic item suspensions, but actually inauthentic within Amazon doesn't mean what it means to you and me, typically. We think in terms of genuine product or not legitimate product, that would be flagged as inauthentic. Amazon created this unfortunate term as a catch-all for all kinds of complaints to be housed in one category of, it could be an item condition complaint, like this doesn't look new.
Okay.
Like the last time I bought it, or the packaging was different last time I bought it, so I don't think this is genuine. It could just be a packaging upgrade issue that wasn't corrected on the image or corrected on the product detail page.
I've heard of that one a lot, where different sellers are using different even packaging. Yeah, just slight differences.
Yeah.
And it could be 100 people. Okay. I've heard that term, and I never knew exactly if they were complete knockoffs or what the deal was, though.
Well, sellers think they're being accused of selling knockoffs, and they don't understand it. That's some of the lightning bolt, suspensions that people get. they're surprised because they're thinking, well, I've even submitted Amazon teams. I've submitted invoices for this ASIN in the past and they accepted it, or for a similar ASIN. But I've been selling this brand for years and I've always had invoices. I mean, some of them even have authenticity letters, which I recommend for everyone who sells anything pretty much at this point. They have authenticity letters from the brand or from the supplier, and the supplier might be an established distributor, possibly even named on the brand's website as an authorized reseller of the items. But that's not really how Amazon works inside. If you get a buyer to complain that your items are fake, you still have to provide that documentation. If they don't just take a quick look at your account like, oh, we went through this before and we cleared them, so forget it. We're not going to take any action here. It doesn't work that way.
So it's kind of guilty until proven innocent sort of thing, where if someone complains, they first kind of put you in the pen off to the side, and then you have to go back and prove your innocence. So it works
right. I mean, a lot of people are hiring me to solve these things because these are solvable reinstatements, but you have to do them a certain way.
So that's kind of leads me to the next question. Like, so you get this letter, or you get the account shut off, and all of a sudden, there's that big, I think it's a red message up top. So what do you do next? Because I know there's an appeal process, and how does that, like, what should you do, and I guess what shouldn't you do?
I mean, let's start with the obvious, what you shouldn't do. I mean, there's an appeal button right there in Seller Central that everyone's tempted to click, right? And people still do this. I mean, as time's gone on, I think they realize that haste makes waste and not as many people do this right away. But you can't stop the initial anxiety that hits you when you think you won't be selling for the rest of that day, the rest of that week, the rest of that month. So we still see a lot of terrible, terrible appeals. I mean, I just caution people, take a step back, look at what they're asking, look at what drove the complaints that led to the suspension, whether they're from a brand or from a buyer. Don't cave into the knee-jerk reactions of, oh, a competitor's just sabotaging me, or buyers only complain because they wanted free return shipping, or buyers didn't understand the product, so it's their failure to read the product detail page correctly. It's not anything I should have done to the product detail page.
Because that appeal, that's kind of a one-way thing, right? Like, it's not like you don't hit the button and you chat. You hit the button and you kind of send off the message and you just sit there and wait.
So the appeal button, they give you different boxes depending on what reason you're suspended. Is it performance? Is it policy? Is it something else? They give you a different place to put the appeal. I just recommend that everyone draft it, redraft it, go through a revision process. Make sure you don't have a lot of extraneous information in there, like emotion-based information. Don't talk about how much you love Amazon, how much you hate Amazon. This is a one-pager. In 95% of the cases, we help people put together a one-page document, which is mostly bullets and numbers. I mean, we have maybe one-sentence bullets, but still concise and direct information there. Not a lot of extraneous, commentary. Not a lot of debating or defending yourself. You're not necessarily being accused of something the way you feel like you are. They want a very proactive plan, and they want to see that you understand the underlying causes for why they had to suspend you to begin with.
Yeah, you see people with a lot of emotion into this, saying, I've been a seller for 13 years, and I did this, and I've been, I have this many listings, and they kind of just talk about themselves.
People send me these appeals to look at them over before they send them in. And there's a right way to do a plan of action and a wrong way. I do sometimes say, it's okay to have one line in your introduction that says how long you've been selling or how long you've been selling the products, if it's all based around one brand or one type of complaint. But you're really talking about one or two sentences max. You don't want to lose your audience early. These investigators have metrics just the way sellers do, and they have to review it quickly. They're probably doing 2 or 3 minutes on your appeal. And some of that time isn't just reading your plan of action. They're reading your account annotations and whatever came in the past as well.
So they're doing quite a few of these per day. So it's not just
13 to 15 an hour on average.
Oh, wow.
It's not that every hour somebody walks over and says you only did 7 last hour. You can't have too many hours in a day where you do 7. I mean, that's true. But that's never going to change. As time goes on, they have to do more and more at least partial investigations per hour. Every year they up that number. So, there aren't thousands of people there to do this. I mean, there's a lot of people in India doing this. There are people in Seattle doing it. But it's not seller support, by the way. It's seller performance. People still spend a lot of time on the phone with seller support trying to get tips and what should I do and can you help me with this? I mean, 90% of the time, seller support can't really give you anything other than generic advice.
And they can't contact the other team. Like, they're totally separated, right?
Seller performance investigators generally don't even look at the case information. Seller support tells you that they're contacting seller performance, and they have an ability to do it. But generally, the information winds up in a case. Performance investigators don't really have time to go through the case unless it's one case number and they know that everything they need is exactly in that case, and it doesn't go on and on. Sellers kind of have to get used to the idea of appealing in writing and doing all this in writing, because talking on the phone is sort of therapy, but that's really all it is. It's because a certain percentage of us still like to do things over the phone. And let's face it, a lot of sales and things like that still happen over the phone, and that's fine. But this isn't sales. This is appealing something in writing with teams that evaluate you in writing and send written correspondence back to you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you have that feeling where it's basically like the site's down, like something like the server's down, like you should pick up the phone and just call them real quick, and if we could only talk, we could fix this right now. But that's not the process, right? This is like an appeal.
Yeah, if you've got all the hours in the day that you want,
yep.
Sure. You might get a kernel of information out of that phone call that, especially if they actually do look into your account and find some annotations that you can't see, that's internal to Amazon investigators, and they read some of that to you. Of course, that's valuable. That's real intel. The rest of it is pretend intel, or they're giving you advice that they gave to the last caller, but they're making a judgment that they're not really qualified to make, that you're the same as the last caller. That's not the same thing as having valuable, important advice on how to appeal. The rest of it that we see is just general appeal information, things you can find in seller help pages, or they're just reading
the seller help pages to you.
Do you like having somebody read to you? Maybe that's nice for a Charles Dickens novel by the fireplace.
Yep.
When your eyesight's failing you later in life. But I don't need things to be read to me. You need your best writer. A lot of people want to have their Amazon account manager write the appeal, or they want to have the CEO of the company write the appeal, simply because they're important within the company or within the account operations. But that person might not be a good writer. And this is like communication. If you lose them early, they will stop reading. If they like the so-called root causes of your suspension, which many people will simply write, "You suspended me for inauthentic complaints on this ASIN and this ASIN," or they'll take it a step further and say, "Because we had complaints from the orders of these items of those ASINs," but that's just the what, right? You're not giving them the why you got those complaints. You're not giving them the how you got those complaints, and that's what root causes really are to them.
Their goal, the investigators are trying to really understand what was the root cause and what you did to correct that root cause, essentially. So do you even understand what was the root cause? Or are you just kind of, talking about your failings and saying kind of what went wrong? So basically, do you understand that root cause? And then what are you doing to actually, prevent this in the future, basically?
And prevention is the key, because your plan of action has to be proactive measures you're taking. A lot of people misunderstand that and just put a series of reactions. We got a complaint, we stopped listing the item. We got 2 complaints, we pulled the inventory out of FBA. If we get complaints in the future, we'll refund buyers. This is another point. None of this has to do with customer service or refunds. They assume you're doing that already. So people are filling their plans of action with, if we get a complaint, we follow up with the buyer, we make sure they're happy, we refund their money. We don't even ask for returns. None of this should go in a POA. It's all irrelevant. It seems important, but it is, but not for this. You have to remember your audience, because I can guarantee you the investigators, their eyes start glazing over when they read that stuff.
So what they want to know is why you got the complaint, though, in the first place, right?
This is your opportunity to prove to them that you have a prevention plan for future complaints. What you did about past complaints, that's water under the bridge. They certainly care that you're taking care of buyers and messaging them back, and you're looking at complaints and you see negative feedback and you do something about it. But they want to know what you did about it and why the quality of your actions will prevent future problems that are similar to this. Otherwise, why reinstate you to begin with? You'll just keep going in circles. You're creating work for investigators, because if you're going in circles, they have to keep looking at your account over and over, which means their Q levels stay high, which means they have to keep suspending people and reading appeals. And it just goes on and on like that. Which over time, they will start automating more of these processes, because they can't, their capacity is breaking under the weight of all this stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, the other thing you see people writing is they're trying to talk about, I think people feel like they're always a very large seller on Amazon. And kind of, the thing you always keep in mind is no matter how big you are, there's someone like 10 and 100 and probably even larger than that.
And I appreciate that. I mean, I have a wide range of clients. I have some very, very high-end, high-revenue clients who do millions per month. And there are other people who do millions per year instead of per month. And I understand that. But yeah, I've had, that's interesting that you said that, because I have calls with people, new clients all the time, who think they're high revenue. Hey, we're not a small seller, so I don't know why they're doing this to us. And then we start digging into the revenue numbers. You should be selling millions per month, not per year, before you even start thinking that way.
Yep. Okay, that's a good. Yeah. So millions a month is a.
That's the best way to think. I don't know any other shorthand to explain it to people, because I do have this conversation, I would say weekly, with people who feel like they're big. They're not big enough to be invited to certain events in Seattle usually. Think of it like that's another yardstick. Maybe you're not hearing from getting invitations to have a marketplace growth manager. You might be. I mean, if you're doubling and tripling revenue and you went from 1 million in 2016, you did 2 or 3 million in 2017, and now you're looking at 6 to 8 or even 10. Yeah, I mean, of course that's going to get noticed, but you need that kind of growth. Yep. To be smaller side and get that kind of notice.
And then once you have like a marketplace manager, you'd have someone kind of on the inside to help advocate for you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, maybe we can have a future podcast just about account management and what it means to have an account manager. That's another question I get almost every day. How do I get an account manager? Most people who ask me that question don't understand how account management works or what the account manager can do for them. And then there are people who are invited. Right now it's invite only to get a marketplace growth manager. So they took things like Seller Support Plus, which was also invite only. That was $500 a month for your own dedicated seller support. And they took strategic account management. They started lumping these things into, we just need one program where you pay a certain amount of money a month, right? It's fee for service. You're paying anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a month for the account manager, but there are certain things they do and certain things they can't do. So some people don't think it's worth it because they want round-the-clock seller performance help from this person, which isn't really what it's intended for. They're there to help you grow within the category and double and triple your revenue every year, right?
Okay.
So they can help, work on and get some intel for you and get some background on warnings that you're sent.
But that's not their, focus.
That's not their primary directive. And also it depends on the account manager as well. Some people are new to Amazon, not just this role. Some people aren't new to Amazon, but they are new to this role. So marketplace growth's only been around for a few months. They've been inviting people, but we're getting feedback all over the map on it. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's not a panacea. Most people are experimenting with it because it's $2 or $3 grand a month, and they tend to be higher end, higher revenue sellers who are getting invited to do this.
So unless you have one of those, you shouldn't start, pounding your chest and saying, how loud you are.
Or unless you've been on for a while and you've been grandfathered in with a previous account manager. Typically, though, they have a solution for that. If your account manager leaves, they don't necessarily replace that person, right? They sort of say like, well, we'll let you know if we're going to be able to fold you into this new program. They don't just say, oh, we're grandfathering in everyone from the 2009 period who had an account manager then who suddenly lost their person now. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, if they're gravitating towards fee for service, you can sort of see they don't have the incentive to just keep giving you a dedicated person unless it's warranted by your clean performance record. You don't have a lot of policy violations. Maybe you're already participating in things like Amazon lending, right? You're taking loans. I mean, if you're invited to take a loan and you don't think you need it, eventually they'll stop offering. So that's another strategic decision people make. Should I take the loan or not? The loan is meant not to give you an in with somebody inside who could help you with seller performance. It's meant to help you in the short term grow your business, right? And expand your relationship with Amazon, which, every seller has to make a cost benefit analysis of whether or not they want to invest that additional money per month in an account manager, or if they even want to take the loan. But if you say no to everything, you'll eventually not get invited.
You won't get invited back. Yeah.
They'll stop inviting you. I mean, if you keep growing and growing and growing, you will get a phone call or an email from somebody eventually, of course. But what if you want to do something with them this year, not next year, and not 2 years from now? It's a lot easier to open up that conversation and to have them connect you to another party within Amazon. Or let's say you just want to make a big move within your category. Well, a manager might be able to introduce you to a category manager who can talk strategy with you, who's living and breathing your category every day of their life. Your marketplace growth manager isn't doing that. They've got different people with different categories that they're handling. I mean, maybe even if they have mostly sellers in the same category, they have different levels of expertise within Amazon itself.
Because there's folks that specialize in a per category basis.
I mean, I've seen and talked to some of the same marketplace growth managers because they're dealing with clients I have that are in the same category. But it also depends on their personality. I mean, they might not talk to you more than once a month. They might not follow up on your emails as quickly. Everybody who works at Amazon's already just assumed they're overloaded and they're putting spare time, like personal time, into their job. But there's only so much personal time to put into it too. I mean, they can't work 24/7 and get back to everybody. Assume they have a lot on their plate. So,
yeah, I think that's kind of the thing. Just assume, everyone there is busy and you're not going to get an instant reply to anything. Because I think some people also, when they actually do file that appeal, they kind of hold their breath and wait for that reply. And it's like, what's that process actually like? Because I know, it's not, after you have your bulleted list and you, I guess that's a good question. What kind of things should you be saying that you're doing to prevent this from happening in the future? Like, what's a good example of something went wrong and what to do?
Right. I've built beyond my consulting. I also have digital products like online courses. I have a membership that I can tell you about later. But the entire point of the membership is to keep trouble away or at bay. And when you get these notifications, instead of ignoring them or saying, well, we're not selling that anymore, we don't care, to help people correspond back to those teams and resolve those notifications so you don't have a mark against you or a strike against your record. Because if you keep accumulating these complaints, eventually you get manually investigated by a person. Certainly not, soft block listings, like the ones where you can relist the item yourself, where they just give you a snapshot of some complaints or return reasons. Those you can take care of relisting it. You can still sell the items, but you still have to do some research and homework, right? You have to figure out why people are complaining to begin with. Otherwise, they will eventually come, send you a real notification. And if your solutions aren't working, you'll have this problem across other ASINs and they will suspend the account. So from my perspective, suspensions are largely preventable. And I don't see that these are lightning strikes nearly as often as other people do.
Well, and it sounds like those little dings add up more than people realize, right? Where you think, it's just a little thing they kind of warn you about and you say, okay, great. And then it goes away because you don't hear from them again for a couple months. And then, like you said, lightning strikes and all of a sudden the account's just off. And it's almost like, how did that happen?
And if you're countering these, if you're pushing these back one at a time, you're reducing the odds that algorithm is going to, catch up with you. I mean, every time you get these dings, like you said, you're nudging closer and closer to at least a manual review. Most of those, a large percentage of those result in a suspension. So as long as you know that you're resolving these as they come in, eventually somebody will look at your account and say, why are you getting 1 million of these a month, whether you resolve them or not? But the theory is that you're taking actions that are preventing future complaints similar to the past complaints. Some of that's logistics. Some of it's, you might be a private label seller. You're selling a product you have to abandon that you've invested in. But you're doing that as a risk assessment to protect the account overall. And you're taking the hit on that one ASIN to save the business overall, because most of the sellers I work with, 90% of their business is on Amazon. So they have to take a holistic view of, I might have a shortfall on this particular product line. I might have to abandon it, but we're getting too many complaints on it. We have to take some measures to protect the entire business.
Yeah, it definitely. So this is going back some time, but I sold on Amazon. Through an e-commerce business and was getting a lot of late shipment notices. And that's actually the reason behind why kind of Spark Shipping, which, one of the reasons why it was created just out of need some way to automate that. And I remember that was actually, got actually a suspension. So that's why it's very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, of course.
So it actually
was not a pleasant experience.
Yeah, and I remember talking with the automation at the time, and there wasn't a name Spark Shaper at the time, but
right.
Talking about how we added an automation, we're going to start doing these things, and the account was reinstated actually. So that was kind of basically because at the time we were doing it manually, and you would get tracking numbers on a Friday, and let's just say you didn't put them in until Monday, we'd be sending products and we get back a tracking number from a manufacturer and they'd say, we shipped this, but maybe I left the office, we got it at 3 p.m. Maybe left the office a little early. No one put them in that Friday. Monday rolls around and you come back and there's all these late notifications. You're like,
Amazon's very unforgiving. A lot of people, it makes sense to you and me that this would happen, right? Some people give their staff the afternoon off. on a holiday,
And you
and
can
it
see
just makes
a
sense
long
out in the
weekend, and you
world.
can see it happening. Like
The weekends, or you get a buyer complaining to you, sending you a message, direct message on a weekend, and maybe it doesn't get answered within 24 hours, which you're supposed to probably answer them within as quickly as possible, within a few hours. Because the quicker you answer a buyer complaining, the less likely they are to go directly to Amazon and say, well, I tried contacting the seller and I didn't hear from them, so now I want to file a claim. Now I want to leave a negative feedback, and I want to complain to you that I didn't get what I was supposed to get. And if you had answered them faster, they wouldn't have gone to Amazon directly.
and a lot of people are saying, "Where's my package?" And if you
I
didn't,
mean, it's
yeah,
just a 24-hour marketplace. If you're
yep,
not going to answer people on the weekend, find somebody who will do that for you.
yep,
And the stories, they don't like excuses, even if it's a valid, what you and I consider a valid excuse.
yeah. It's not. Yeah, it was a long weekend, and we went to the beach, so we didn't put the tracking numbers in. That's not a valid reason.
People go away. In the old days, people went away and didn't put their accounts on vacation
Yep.
mode. I mean, basic stuff like that, they don't care. I mean, they don't spend any time thinking about this. That's why in the appeals process, when people say I've got 4 kids to feed, or this is my only income,
Yes.
I mean, honestly, they're so numb to that. There's no point in bringing that up at all. They've heard it 1,000 times, and it doesn't make a dent anymore. You're not going to appeal to their better nature unless it's a very unique instance where it's like, look, Amazon kind of failed us and they dropped the ball on alerting. You told us that you had previously warned us for this, and we went through our notifications. We never got the warning, and it's like an investigator mistake type situation. But be 100% certain.
Yeah.
Don't start
Don't
saying
point fingers
stuff
at
like
Amazon
that.
if it's not really
Oh
Amazon's
yeah,
fault.
and
Okay.
they rush through this work, and I mean, they make mistakes all the time. Sometimes they annotate the account that they messaged you, and then they don't send the message because it's a multi-step process, or they send you the message and they don't annotate the account, so the next investigator doesn't know what's going on. I mean, these things happen all the time, but unless you can see into the tools, I mean, you can't hang your hat on that. Yeah, very unique situations. Sometimes investigators will look and say, we kind of failed this person. There was a mistake here. I've worked on situations like that many times. They will reinstate the account when they think it's justified. But 99% of the time, it's somebody who said, you've made a mistake and you're punishing us for something we didn't do. And then they look at the account, and the first thing they say is, well, we see lots of reasons to suspend you, and we don't agree with you at all. And what we say goes. So if you want to spend weeks not selling, you can fight us on this and you can have your lawyer write an angry letter to us, but we need certain things from you, and we already requested it, and you're not giving it back to us. So
Basically, the goal is, file the appeal and let them know what you're doing to fix it. That's number one. Not even why it happened is like the 10%, but the other 90% of the letter should basically be, what you're doing in the future to fix it and why this will never happen again.
yeah, if you don't get the why, if you're either giving them jargon and it's not believable, it's not credible, then they won't read the other 90% if you don't get the why right.
Okay, so explain.
Like
Talk
if
to
you're
them like they're a
guessing,
real person, basically. Like an actual person, and explain to them there was a mistake, but here's all the things we're doing to fix that.
yeah, admit to mistakes. Don't cover up. Don't focus on debating with them or defending yourself. Just focus on a mistake was made. We've done a lot of digging. We figured out what it was. Maybe even sometimes the buyers just misunderstood your products, and that's what this is all about. They said it was not authentic. They said it was different from described. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding, but you have to take responsibility, unfortunately, for that misunderstanding.
Maybe the responsibility is making better descriptions, making better photos, just improving the listing itself.
Better photos, better listing content, better described product. You've pushed it to the point where you're almost certain. You have no doubt in your mind that there's any ability for anybody, even somebody with a 4th grade reading level, to misunderstand what your product does, what it says it'll do, what comes with it, what the accessories are, anything. Make sure it's just, you put your listings, let's say your private label, you're 100% in control of that listing. You know what will convince people of what they're getting versus, this isn't as expected, this isn't as described. Don't leave any gap there in the back of their mind that they're potentially misunderstanding the product. So
leave nothing to chance.
Nail the root causes. Yep. Nail the root causes. Don't talk about what you will do or what isn't quite ready yet. Talk about completed actions when you give them the plan of action.
Okay, that's the completed action. So what has been done and how it basically will fix it so in the future this will not happen again.
And on a basic level, just will this work? I mean, don't blow smoke in their faces. I mean, they have to believe that they have to be convinced that this isn't just pie in the sky. If your ideal ideal solution is something that's not attainable for most sellers, then don't promise to do these things. Over promising and under delivering is a really bad idea with a plan of action, because they can just resuspend you if they see the same complaints coming in next month.
And that's the thing. Now this is on record, and you've been notified. So now, after you actually submit the appeal, what actually happens internally? Like, where does this go, and what should you expect, for a response? What happens next?
They evaluate it to see if it's credible, to see if they're going to be back in the same place with you in a few days or a few weeks. They don't want to reinstate you prematurely, because they can be audited afterwards for a bad reinstatement on a weak plan of action. So that's, they don't have a lot of incentive to reinstate sellers and watch you go down the tubes. They have incentive to really, go through your POA line by line as quickly as possible. But yeah, they need to see certain kinds of information there that talks about a process. I guess I would give your listeners some advice in terms of, don't say we're retraining everybody without saying how or why that's going to make a difference. If you're talking about new quality control, new inspection methods, new item quality assessments for items you get from this or that supplier, or even if you're going to keep that supplier, let's say you're a reseller and you keep getting bad batches from the same supplier, don't just tell Amazon, well, we're not going to source from that guy anymore. Tell them, if you're selling those same products in the future, who are you sourcing from? Where's the link to their website? Like, give them process information that shows that you're vetting people differently than how you did things before. This has to be an improvement plan where you're admitting that a process in the past failed, at least on some level it failed. I mean, we all have things, whether we're consultants or sellers, that we can be improving, right?
Yep.
So view it as an improvement plan, even if you don't agree that you need to improve much. View it as an improvement plan. These are processes that you're tightening up. And also talk about, like, we're also double checking this to make sure, and we're testing this new process to make sure that it's going to work. And who's testing it? Well, it's manager level. It's not just employees who are watching each other who aren't responsible for the performance of that team. It's being observed on an ownership level, or it's being audited on a managerial level. That's what they want to hear.
Okay, so they really want to hear the details of the process and step by step, the quality controls in place, and okay. So
very due diligence heavy. I understand some of these companies are only 2 or 3 people. I mean, my consulting company is me and other people I worked with at Amazon, but we're a small crew overall. So I understand that you don't necessarily have a manager who's watching 10 or 12 people every second of the day, but they need it to sound like somebody's in charge, somebody's taking responsibility, and they're going to be double checking throughout the day or week on A, B, and C on a regular basis to make sure that things are running like a Swiss watch. Because if they're not, you can't just say, well, a lot of new sellers do this. I'm not sure why they still try it, but they say, well, we're newbies. And we didn't know the policy. And I understand the human nature reason why they say it, but you're kind of digging your own grave if you give them that kind of talk, because to them, you're saying, I wasn't ready for Amazon. I wanted to start selling stuff and make money, and I cut corners, and I didn't have a process in place, and I didn't train my employees right on Amazon specific information. Maybe you have a great sales, process through your own website or through eBay. Amazon is its own universe.
Yeah, so it's kind of like just getting your driver's license and using that as an excuse for a moving violation and saying, well, I didn't know how fast it's supposed to go, so I did whatever I want, or doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah, I was driving in Ohio instead of Massachusetts, and I didn't know the laws in Ohio were different from Massachusetts. Guess whose fault that is? And that's really the way they look at it. I mean, it's on you. It's a big burden and it's a big responsibility, but they also, if you can't do the crime, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. So you can't just come back and say, well, I've got 10 employees to feed and you've suspended me. Why are you doing this? Before you hired those 10 people, you had to learn all the policies. So if you were committing all these policy violations, they would say, well, why didn't you front load the policy compliance part instead of just listing a bunch of stuff and sourcing a bunch of stuff really quickly without doing your homework?
That's kind of the big thing right there. If you're going to be listing a lot of products, selling a lot of products, you need to be someone that becomes a job. Having, I don't know if it's a compliance person or what the actually role will be called, but someone internally to really be watching all these metrics. And because if they go south, it can go south real quick. So
you can hire an Amazon account manager. I mean, you don't have to do every single thing yourself and micromanage every task related to your Amazon account. But I mean, and by the way, I mean, I'm not just tough on like clients in terms of their running a tight ship. I mean, friends and family ask me this stuff too. And I tell them, like, when you hire an Amazon account manager, you should have me on the call when you interview them, or like, let me quiz them on a few things, because if they can't answer certain questions, then you're not really hiring an Amazon account manager. You're hiring an e-commerce account manager who knows your business, but doesn't know the Amazon side of your business.
Okay. So you're saying, have an external, someone that works for you, directly for you, that just manages your Amazon account. That's their role. Or, even if it's part-time.
A lot of people do this themselves, but just
Yep.
understand that if you don't have that dedicated person who understands how this stuff works, you can't approach Amazon later when there are problems and say, we're a small seller, we're a new seller. Don't sound like a hobbyist or a mom and pop shop or anything small, because if they think that you don't even care how much you grow, you just want to maintain what you're doing now, they think you're small time or you're a small fry. And I'm sorry, but there's marketplace consolidation going on. Amazon isn't a small business opportunity as much as it used to be. And Amazonians themselves care a lot more about people who are going to be doubling and tripling revenue year over year.
Got it.
It's just that's supply and demand. That's just, Amazon's a hot marketplace. There's a lot of money involved in it. And Amazon invests a lot in their people too. I mean, when they're paying account managers, and they're hiring like crazy. So they have to kind of think in terms of, well, which marketplace players are going to be worth our time, because we don't want to necessarily spend all our day educating people on things that they could be reading themselves. And then they weren't reading the policies and they said, well, I didn't know.
So then once you actually submit this, and what do you expect timeline-wise to actually get a response back? And
Sorry, I didn't answer your.
No,
I didn't answer your original question.
Well, no, because I think that's a big thing. Because I think people submit it, and then you kind of just sit there and hold your breath, and you don't know if this is going to be minutes, hours, days, weeks, and your account's just like off. Yeah, right.
One of the least relevant questions I get from sellers is they emailed me back after 2 hours last time, and it's been 2 days. Doesn't matter. It all depends on how many email queues are sitting in seller performance. How quickly they answered you last time has no bearing on how quickly they answer you this time. None at all. Unless, of course, it's Prime Day, it's Cyber Monday, Black Friday, whatever. Of course, it's going to take them longer to respond to you, because people are more desperate to get an answer quicker when their account is shut down.
But it doesn't necessarily mean anything bad for your particular account or complaint. It could just be they just have more calls.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if days and days are going by and you're getting no response, but you've emailed them 1,000 times already, it's because you've emailed them 1,000 times, and that's why you're getting no response. What you're talking about is the first appeal. When you hit the appeal button, they date and timestamp when you should hear back by. I don't know if I'd wait until a minute later and then say, you were supposed to email me by noon today and it's 12:01. What the hell are you doing? You might want to give them a little bit more time. You can certainly send what they call a nudge email and follow up and say, we were supposed to hear today. We didn't hear today. Our account suspended. We've got a plan of action that addressed all the issues that were going wrong with the account. There's nothing wrong with sending an email to seller performance asking for an update like that. But people take it to an extreme and start emailing every hour. We still haven't heard. What are you doing? Do I have to write to Jeff himself? Then you start, everybody does that. The Jeff email becomes an email that everyone's using for everything under the sun, which means that you're even less likely to receive a response in a timely manner. So be strategic, be judicious. Of course, if your email was, like I said, if your account was annotated and they threw away the reply they were supposed to send you, that's a problem. You have to follow up. Don't wait days and days, but also don't expect a response the same time that your last email got responded to.
And for a response, what do you is it typically just, yes, we're going to turn it back on, or no, you're off forever, or like what happens? Like, what is the thing you can expect?
Yeah, the average response, I mean, they like to make life hard on people, so they don't typically accept the first plan of action. I mean, of course, some of the ones that we're involved with from the beginning, we get them back on the first try.
Yep.
But even, some of the cases we work on, sometimes they say we need more information.
Yep.
And maybe it's one thing, maybe it's two things, but there's something missed either in the root causes or the plan of action. And it also, I mean, sometimes I find this out later, but the plan of action is 100% solid. There's documentation missing. Like it's an inauthentic suspension. And if you're sourcing from a brand who can't get you an authenticity letter, you just have an invoice, or you have an invoice that's over 365 days old, or you've got an invoice that's hard to read, or they think you made your invoice yourself, which of course is kind of a type of fraud that they don't want to see you doing. If there's documentation missing, then they won't reinstate you until they get what they need to go with the plan of action. So Safety complaints. I mean, a lot of people just say we're FDA approved. We've been selling this for years. We haven't had any complaints on 99% of our orders, and they're just sending the wrong kind of material. So they get a reply that says, we need more information. Now, how specific are they about what they need? They don't want to serve it up to you on a platter and make it so that you're just copying and pasting. They still want you. I mean, it's murky, and it's unfortunate that they're not more specific. Some of that's because of privacy. They don't want you going to specific buyers and saying, hey, you're the reason I got suspended.
Is there a time you're getting like a hard no? Like, can they reply back and just say, sorry, that's the end?
Yeah. They'll send you a general denial, or they just think your metrics are way, way out of range and they don't even want you to appeal. Or they just think that your plan of action is way off and that you're guessing, you have no idea what you're talking about. You copied and pasted some appeal that you bought online for a couple $100. I mean, if they think you're working with some sort of chop shop consultant, then they're not going to spend any time on it. They're going to send you a general denial, which, they might add the language like, we may not respond to future emails, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't respond if you send them a real appeal with real information.
Okay, so it's still not, all hope is lost. You could still try at some point, but it just gets drastically less likely each time you do a bad job.
Each time you do it, yeah. There are people who contact me and they really just burn through all their appeals.
Yep.
And, they're taking a gun and firing all the bullets out of it and still hoping they can go hunting with it. And it doesn't work that way. If you burn through your appeals, they will stop reading. They will stop talking to you, and don't give them the incentive to ignore you, because they love investigations where they can skip right over you. They get credit for that investigation just as much as they do something they spend 10 minutes on.
So you eventually go on the bad list, and at that point, it's really hard to get back on the good list.
Yeah, if you've sent them 3 or 4 appeals and they say we may not respond to future messages, appeals from you, that's not the same as having them say we may not respond after 1 appeal. I can almost guarantee you that they will respond. Of course, it depends on what you're doing. If they think you're committing fraud, they're not going to respond to you at all. Or the nature of the offenses. If they think you're trying to game the system, I mean, there are still people that are out buying fake product reviews and, hiring these third-party service providers to manipulate sales rank, or, like I said, product review abuse. If they think that you're just out to get them and you're not cooperative and you're really just out to disrupt the entire marketplace, they're not going to waste their time on you.
And that's one of those, there are obviously, and you hear about this, people, like you said, fake reviews. So there's the, egregious, just they are doing something bad. And as a seller, you probably at that point realize you're doing something bad. And, you have a product that got, 100 sales and you have 100 5-star reviews. Everyone knows, you did something that you crossed the line. So that could be one of those times where it's a hard no and it's not coming back.
Yeah, I mean, in my world, there aren't that many hard no's. Of course, I weed those people out when they contact me originally in terms of, hey, there's maybe not a lot I can help you with. I mean, my calendar is open to anybody on my website. Anyone can book an hour of my time. But typically people, come in through my contact form first and give me an idea of what they're suspended for. And I can figure out well, there's not a lot we can really do here. You've broken a lot of rules. Some people have just been suspended once a year on average for 6 years, and you get to your 6th suspension and they're like, we go through this with you every year. You're not getting it. You're not don't act like the kind of seller they don't want, act like the kind of seller who maybe made a mistake, maybe could improve some of your operations, but you've learned your lesson and you're ready to correct for it. Product reviews. I mean, there are plenty of people contacting me saying, well, our competitors are doing fake reviews, so we had to do it too just to keep up. But that's going to fall on deaf ears. They don't care.
Yeah, not a valid, he did it, so I can too.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Not a lot of hard no's. Most people who come to me are people who, even if they've been suspended before, we can help them get back on. They've written some low quality appeals. We can help them, tune it up to a high quality where somebody's actually going to read it. They're going to care. Something we haven't talked about is the escalations process. I mean, if you've written a great POA, plan of action, and they're simply not paying attention to it for whatever reason, maybe you're just unlucky, or maybe you missed a couple things on the first couple go rounds and they're not really reading them anymore, you can escalate that. I mean, you've got a good plan of action, so you've got something to escalate with. The biggest misconception around escalations is, oh, we have to write to Jeff at Amazon.com because we got denied, or because they keep asking us for more information. Maybe there's a reason they're asking you for more information. You're missing something that they really need you to see, that they need to see. They need you to put in there, and you haven't put it in there for some reason. It's a painful decision to make where you're going to cost yourself some sales or some money. But they don't care about that. They need the appeal to match reality. And if you're just making things up to get reinstated, that doesn't mean that you can escalate it because they're not paying attention to you. It means that you're not giving them the information they need for an acceptable reinstatement.
So there is an escalation process somewhere between frontline support and before you have to go directly to Jeff. There's something in between.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot in between, actually. That's why it drives me crazy when people do the Jeff ad emails so quickly, just because they've heard that this email exists and they know that Jeff at least used to read some of these emails himself. I mean, you could do a shot in the dark type appeal like that, where you've got a lousy plan of action and they simply send you a reply asking you for a better one. But why bother doing that when you can just improve the plan first and then escalate it later, and preferably escalate it within the teams that suspended you? When you write to Jeff, you're writing to executive seller relations, which is you're basically indicting the team and complaining that they didn't properly review your appeal. And that's a nuance that a lot of people don't understand. They don't even really know the difference between the teams, but you're kind of saying, like, we gave them everything they wanted. They didn't do their jobs. Now we have to complain to you because we need your help to reprimand them for not reinstating us. Yeah.
It's like going over your manager's head to try to,
right.
Yes.
Exactly.
And then point fingers back at the manager and wonder why it's not working. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But largely there's a reason. The automatic assumption on your side that there's just nobody reading it is kind of convenient for you. It might not square with. I mean, why send that to an investigator who looks at your account and says everything's been written, everything that's been written so far has been evaluated specifically and annotated in detail on this account. So you've lost that audience immediately, and it could be your last chance at a reinstatement.
Yeah, I feel like the big takeaway here is, when you're writing this whole appeals process, there are actually people on the other end and they're reading it and you're having like a conversation, and you need to be like authentic and actually have a plan of action. Realize you did something wrong, realize here are the steps to fix it. And it's not just like a thing you're going to game. And like, if I hit the right buttons, I'm going to get the outcome I want. It's really actually a person, and you need to talk to them like actual humans and explain to them. Yeah. Explain to them what you're going to do.
Yeah. These are important business decisions that have to be made by a person. People adjudicate appeals. I mean, I used to work there, so of course it sounds crazy to me when people tell me like, oh, nobody read my appeal. It just bounced back to me with an automated response. I mean, autoresponders, when you're out of the office on vacation or after hours stuff, that's totally different than sending an appeal to Amazon, where the fate of your Amazon business might be hanging in the balance. I mean, they understand. They don't take that lightly. I mean, they're getting commissions from you too, don't forget. So they care too. It's not just that they don't care like on a visceral level whether or not you're selling on the site. I mean, if you're a seller who can be easily replaced by 10 other sellers tomorrow selling the same brand, then yeah, I mean, obviously there's a difference between that and a private label seller who's the only person selling that product, and you sell 20 million a year. I'm not saying that's not the case, but they care about your business. You're a customer, you're a buyer too. So,
well, that's very helpful. I think that helps put a lot of light on the subject where, and honestly, I think there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of like myth and lore around the whole process. So
it's opaque, admittedly, and it won't be clearer. They're not going to be a forthcoming company about how they do these investigations anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's good for everyone, because if they were too clear on exactly why they're doing it, it could allow people to game the system more and make the whole thing worse. So
exactly, which is what's happening with product reviews. I mean, right now we're still living in that world where I think a lot of the fraudster types and black hat consultants and tactic people out there understand that the PRA, the product review abuse teams, are maybe lighter staffed, maybe don't have as much time. They're having trouble scaling the work. I think everyone knows this already. This is public information, and that's why reviews are kind of all over the map.
Yeah, that's the big thing right now. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think this is super helpful. So, I mean, if people want to get more, I think, thank you. I think this is definitely one of those subjects that there's a lot of misinformation on. So it helps to, hear from someone who's seen the inside, and, so.
We can always do a part 2, I'm not going anywhere.
It might be helpful. That I'll definitely, we should talk about that. So if people want more information though, if they want to contact you, or maybe someone is suspended right now, what should they do next?
Yeah, I mean, you should definitely go to my website, ecommercechris.com. I've got a contact form there, which is really easy to spot. I've also got, as I said, you can go under my reinstatement tab. I've got it. You've got the ability to book an hour of my time, a 1 hour consult assessment of your situation. Of course, I would look at any past appeals that they had sent in, talk some strategy on what needs to go in the future. And if they've just been suspended, then we need to talk about the causes before we talk about anything else. And I referenced the online courses, I do consulting services, but I've got an online membership, which is ecommercechris.com/membership. And there's a lot of information there for people who want to learn the right way, kind of based on my methodology and my approach, learn the right way to do an appeal yourself. So.
Great. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes just so if anyone wants to check those out. So I think
Terrific. If you're in Boston, right? Like you yep. and I are in the Boston area, so I've got a Boston Amazon seller meetup. So certainly let us know if you want to join some of the events we have going on.
Yeah, I will. Let's put a link to that too. I definitely like to get the Boston e-commerce community
exactly
coming out even larger. So Thank you very much for that. So
you're welcome.
It's been great talking to you, and we'll definitely I'll definitely catch up and talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.